Hi guys, welcome. We're gonna start here once everyone comes in, so it'll be about 3 or 4 minutes. See everyone coming in. We're gonna give everyone about 2 more minutes, and then we'll get started. We got a lot of stuff on the schedule today. Okay, so let's just get started while everyone finishes coming in. We'll do a couple of these things early on. Um, so this is the April 10th ORAN integration meeting. Uh, what we currently have on the agenda is review some of the previous notes and general information. I would like to spend some time at least introducing what we want to do after what we're doing now, after release three. Start with the objectives of what we want to try to accomplish, and then go to users, identify some user stories that align to those. Then I want to give you some information or bring up some information about some possible demonstrations for ORAN and OSC. Give you some information around that. To also give you some information update about the NEPIO Summit and decide so we can decide if there's anything we want to do from the ORAN side. And then we're going to go back into our network automation uh, use cases that we've been discussing, particularly around the Cray cluster, and I've been trying to give about 30 minutes for that. So we're going to still try to do that. They've had some external sessions, but again, we're going to still try to do some of the internal pieces here. Is there anything else on the agenda that excuse me, that I missed? Okay. Hearing nothing, seeing nothing. So the first order of business is to approve the previous minute notes from April 8th. Does anyone object to, or April 3rd, I'm sorry, does anyone object to these minutes? Okay, hearing none, I'll mark these as approved. All right, and then there's a couple just information topics, right? The first one, the next topic is really to discuss release four objectives and to try to identify some user stories. So what I had done is, if you go into the objectives and user stories, we've actually have, this this document, this PowerPoint document here that has our objectives and user stories listed, right? And so what I did, and we did this for release three. This is where we have our release three, and we say what our objectives were, what we're trying to do for release three, and what are the user stories that we want to track, right? And so what I did is I took that, knowing where we're kind of at with those user stories and what we wanted to try to do with some of the stretch goals, and I created this new section to talk about release four objectives and user stories. And I actually added in uh, two of these uh, two of these primary themes, right? Where we want to realize the domain split between the SMO and the OCloud functions with the distinct NEPIO management cluster. And then I came up and with certain objectives, being able to see a POC, Maybe we want to do all the deployments in the NF, want to see deployments based upon Helm charts. Maybe we want to do realization of the NF configuration using O1 because we're using some stretch goals of trying to look at some various alternatives using the O1 NF, using the Yang interface, config netconf Yang interface for the NF, or versus the O1 configured using the NFIO configuration pattern, and try to show the differences between those, right? That was the other piece of objectives that I saw that came out of some of the stretch goals of what we conversations that we wanted to have. I also had some objectives here on a theme of trying to come up with some of the NEPIO service assurance that would go into release 3 in the observation framework, and maybe use that for the IMS and DMS deployment services. And I came in with some possible POCs that we might want to look at it. Anyway, this was the list of objectives that I wanted to get that I thought were in backlog. We don't have to always do this in one release, but these were things that I thought you would want. We don't even have to do any of it if you don't want, right? But I thought I'd give you guys something to shoot at. From there, once we get a list of these objectives, the themes and the objectives that you want to do, we'll come out and we'll just create a list of user stories that identify a set of user stories that we want to try to do for those, right? But this is the first piece that that I think we need to talk about. So I'm going to open it up a little bit for discussion. We only got 10 minutes, so we got about 4 more minutes that we can talk about this. But of course, you can come in and you can comment on this. And my intention is that we give ourselves some time every meeting to discuss this and try to hone in on these objectives and user stories. So the first question I would have to the group was, what do you guys think? Do you think that this is how we should approach our next release? Or is this a good way of doing it? Or does someone have a different way that they want to try to do it?
So, Stefan here, one question on bullet 1. You don't mention a cluster creation here, no? Then you have the exchange and maintain inventory. So it's cluster creation in R3 and then inventory will be R4.
Yeah. I was trying to build on what would have been in release 3, right? So I wasn't going to try to do anything more. But if there's something that falls out of release 3 or something new that we have to do for cluster creation, hey, we'll mention it in as an objective in release 4.
No, it's good. I think it's good. Yeah.
Bala, your hand was raised. If you're speaking, we can't hear you, but Bala, we can't hear you. All right. Well, Bala's trying to fix his mic. Does anyone else have any comment?
I just have one comment,
Yeah.
Tim. I mean, I think we are. There is some level of these features that is being realized, right? I mean, even with realizing, say, NF orchestration using SMO, the inventory piece is missing. But what I'm trying to get at is, can we identify for each of the use cases what is being realized, and then what is the gaps that can be realized in R4? I think that will probably give a better clarity. It's again, I think some of things like assumptions that particularly with the NF orchestration use case, there's an assumption that the cluster information is already registered in the FOCOM. So when you're deploying the NF, you're getting that from the FOCOM and so on. So idea would be that you kind of do the create cluster and then that part of the automation and then do the network function deployment. So I think there is something happening with R3, but I think what we want is more automation with R4. So that I think having that clarity would help understanding what we are going to achieve in R4.
Yeah. So again, I don't have a problem. What you're asking for says, hey Tim, can we step back a second and do a gap analysis of what we said we want to do in release 3 and what we actually visualized, or what where we think gaps are, either because of the analysis we did or because we didn't get. So, Robbie, I don't have a problem with that. Just do me a favor and add a slide in here and put a slide for, release. You can do it.
Yeah, I can take a stab at the the NF orchestration scenario.
Yeah, and we can talk about so people realize what the gaps are. But when we talk about this, it's really we start with what do we want to visualize, right? So we're going to use some POCs and it'll be based. You can use the gaps. I mean, I was just doing it based upon what I heard from the use cases already. So there may be other gaps. So yeah, so if you could start one with a gap on it, then um, uh, then that'll be fine as well. And you can comment on this if you want to add or change anything. Just please do. Just comment on it. And as we go through this, um, hopefully it will form up over time, right? If not, then we'll start doing a review of each one of these themes. Right now, there's 3 themes, if you will, right? So maybe there's other themes that are needed to be out there. So the first set is to talk about what themes we want to do. Then we want to talk about what we want to visualize in terms of proof of concepts or what you want to see, for each one of those things, right? And we'll dig into those things. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Nice.
Okay. All right. So that's what we're going to be doing for the next pieces, the next probably at least several weeks, if not the next month or so, for the user story for the release 4. Now Sagar, I see Sagars aren't good. Sagar was having, and I'll let him talk about this a little bit further, but Sagar was having a discussion actually with the OSC Technical Oversight Committee about possible demonstration for what we're doing in ORAN and then using Nepio uh, uh, for some of their to those organizations, right? And so it brought up a broader question of, we have, if you think about it, we have OEI, OSC, and we have ORAN as close partnerships, collaborations, if you will. More with OSC and OEI, we use the ORAN specifications and we feed those back into them. But I was thinking that maybe, and I've done this in the past open source projects where we said, okay, we're going to take and create, a set of demonstrations, a catalog of demonstrations that we can then provide. We did it before on a yearly basis, right, where we would provide to these collaborating organizations just what we've done, and they can see, the audience there could see it. It's kind of like what we do for Mobile World Congress in some places, but these would be specific to these partners that we're looking at because they're interested in what we're doing. And so the question I had was, one to the group is, does this sound like a good idea? Should we start an initiative of trying to do this where we say, coming out of, probably something like you could put it in line with Mobile World Congress to where you say, coming in as part of our January release, we actually have a set of POCs that then we can show, over the course of the next 6 months to, ORAN, OFC, and OAI, whatever other groups, right? So anyway, Sagar, did I kind of get that correct?
Yeah, you got it exactly correct. If you want me to add some dates, it was last week's meeting where where every week, more or less every time in OSC talk, I tell them what we are doing here in this group and how they can also, so that they can keep a track because the project is now spread across. So they were quite interested if we can show the create cluster user story, especially in the June face-to-face meeting, which is in Seoul. But since June is too close, ORAN face-to-face, June is very close. So I think the only thing which we can do is it's in October or probably even later, whatever everyone decides.
And what I was thinking is that we kind of planned for this stuff to happen, right? And be able to coordinate that going in and utilize the same type of stuff that meets the needs of the various collaborators. and to me, it was like, okay, if we have to do something, we're doing stuff for MWC, maybe we just tie on before that and we take the release. But does anyone have any thoughts on this? Do we think that this is a good idea, or do we want to keep it just ad hoc?
It sounds good, I think.
So does anyone really have an issue with trying to coordinate this with these three groups and have a regular cadence to where we kind of know we have I used to call it a demonstration, a catalog of demonstration library. Okay, so I think what I'll do is I'll take this on and try to figure out how we want to talk about this and do this, right? And so I think what we'll do is we'll try to figure out a good release cadence, for the demonstration, and my intention is that we use it on what we've already released, because I've been a part of this where we try to do stuff that's in process, and it happens. It's successful sometimes, but more times than I'd like to count, it's not successful because you're still putting things together, right? So I don't want to lose, and you tend to have the community lose focus, right? Because now they turn their focus from development to the POC, right, or to the demonstration. And so I try to just demonstrate what is already officially. That's the safest approach that I've seen, and also been the most successful. And really, if you do that in frequent cadences, the audiences don't care, right? They're seeing the progress, and you're usually beyond what they were looking for anyway. So they're pretty well pleased by it. So I think if we take that approach, we'll be successful. We take what we released and decide what we want to provide as demonstration partner programs. So for us, it would be like release 3. Then we'll figure out what we want to provide. Okay. All right. So that's the possible demonstrations. We also found out in Monday's network architecture meeting, there's actually a Nepio Summit. You might not be aware that there is a Nepio Summit happening as part of the Linux Foundation Developer and Testing Forum. And one of the things that so if you go up onto the DNTF site, you'll see that there's the ability to make submissions. The submission deadline's 12 April. I don't know how real that date is, but that's the date that we can put in for ONAP sessions, which currently is pretty thin, right? It means that there's nothing. So my question to the group is that you have to do these on site, right? To the group is there any of these demonstrations that someone wants to do? This will be done, I think it's May 2nd and 3rd is the meetings. Probably the Nepio session I heard was May 2nd, but don't hold me to it because there isn't an agenda out there. But it's certainly the developer forum is May 2nd and 3rd, right after the Alien Summit. So does anyone have any idea of maybe potentially doing some sessions for ORAN? Personally, I'll be on a cruise in the Atlantic, so I will not be there. So, but I don't know. Vish?
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping if there are some ORAN experts that have been working for a while now on ORAN, if I could pair up with somebody to just do a primer on ORAN, basically, like like a 15 to 20-minute things, introduction to ORAN and stuff like that. If people think that's a good idea. Not too heavy on ORAN, but at least like, hey, what do you need to know about ORAN if you want to get started on ORAN? Something like that, if you guys think it's a good idea.
Like a 15-minute session of an
Just introducing ORAN. It's like an ORAN primer.
And then
I know
maybe
people can go Google and find out, but it will be good to actually have there and talk about it.
Yeah, and then maybe ending with something like what we did for where's our deployment? It's here somewhere. Oh, that's working group 2-1. Maybe ending with something like the what we have on our deployment architecture with a short
Okay.
discussion of, ending on this type of thing, right? Says, by the way, this is how we do the integration. Yeah. So if we think that that's valuable, yeah, is anyone who's attending, would they be interested in doing something like that?
At least it'll be valuable to me, like, if I am, because my time is, dispersed between a bunch of different projects, right? So I'm not being able to like every time I need to go look it up, feel like, I wish I got this primer from somebody. So looking to pair up with like a couple of people to do this, who can guide me.
Okay, so let me document that as a possible, and maybe I can ask people that might be there that. Oh, sorry, just a second here, guys.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, when is the deadline for submitting topics?
It's April 12th by the deadline, but I suspect since they don't have any, it'll be longer, but it can't be too much longer because, it's the end of the month already, right? So,
Okay.
I would suspect we probably, and I'm guessing, right? April 12th is the real date. If we give it to them by the 19th, I think they'll be happy.
Absolutely.
So, primer on ORAN and showing how Nefio enables some functionality, right? Architecture. Okay. I'll have to find someone who might be, if you're interested in doing that, this particular one, just either contact me or you can make it known on the Slack channel. Alexis?
Yeah, thank you. I might be interested, which is the reason I raised my hand, and I think along the same lines. Well, let me confirm. I need to change a bit my bookings. No, but
yeah, you got stuck in the
yeah. I mean, count on me, but I'll confirm by Friday. I just need to update my bookings, and I'll make it a primer. But I mean, I want to twist a little bit the proposal here. I don't want to make it a primer about ORAN. I want to make it a primer about ORAN in Nefio, right?
Yeah, I
So
think
I want to share a little bit.
Yeah, I think what he wants is okay. So you want a primer of ORAN in Nefio, right?
Yeah,
Primer
so a little bit of well,
showing
yeah. So this is the strategy.
How ORAN uses Nefio, right? Enablers.
Yeah, and the goal would be to share a little bit the strategy that we've been executing on in this team, share some of the progress we made, and eventually.
But I think what Vish is asking for though is that on this, if you could spend a couple slides in the beginning, some time in the beginning, explaining the
I can provide I can provide a level setting on ORAN itself.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah, okay.
Alexei, I can pair up with. Can you hear me? Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
You hear me down, Tim?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Alexei, I can pair up with you on this. I can help you because I have some of the slides on the ORAN side which I presented to the internal team, which we can reuse, and then probably we can use the deployment architecture from the other one.
Sure.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'll let you guys figure out what you're going to do with that. But I think from Bala's standpoint, he's asking, or not Bala, but Vish's standpoint, he certainly wants to see the explanation. And then you're going to link it in with what we're doing with the Nefio strategy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Sharing a little bit what we're actually doing in this team, how we're working and where we're heading. I mean, what we've done and where we're heading.
Right.
And with the goal to welcome newcomers, obviously, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So any other ones on ORAN that people are thinking? Or Vish, you have your
Yeah. So in my case, when I'm doing this primer, right, with whoever that it will be like, just not focusing. I mean, the pre-thing would be like what before Alexei delves into Nefio and ORAN, ORAN and Nefio, it will be like ORAN doesn't just talk about Kubernetes clusters, but also expands outside of that, right? I mean, there'll be people thinking about virtualization and all that stuff. So that having that understanding also helps, because currently I am more focused on, in these conversations, all I'm thinking about is ORAN and Nephew, but it is more than that. So that is what I was thinking. Anyway, I wanted to make my thoughts loud
Sure.
and share.
Okay. So I don't want it to go more than 2 sessions. I don't think we can really.
Yeah, it
One
should
or
not
two.
be too much. It should be like less than 10 minutes, basically.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about on another session, right? So,
Okay.
so my question to the group is that, is there anything else that someone feels that they want to do that will be at the Nepio Summit, May 2nd or 3rd?
Well, sorry, I haven't raised my hand, but Sagar and I, we have a talk at the One Summit where we'll demonstrate OAI deployment using Nepio, right? So that's going to happen. It's going to be on top of Red Hat's cloud, so OpenShift, but that's something that is happening during the ONE Summit. We could repeat this or shorten it to bring it as well to the Nepio Summit if needed. But that's a demonstration that will happen anyway. But I'm just saying this is something definitely in line with ORAN, because this is all the OAI functions.
I think you're going to have most of the people that were there for the Nepio Summit will have already been there for the ONES Summit. So I don't know if you're going to, unless you're going to change it. Yeah, you're going to, unless you're going to change it or change what you're trying to do with it, then I wouldn't worry about it.
So I think one of the things that we discuss is, I think Sagar will speak about this. So what we'll discuss in the DNTF is the lessons learned and the gaps. Obviously, today Nepio deployment on real clusters will not work. There are some networking issues and other things. So obviously Sagar in his lab is gonna do a few things to make it work. And then one of the things I requested Sagar is to present in this DNTF forum the challenges that we have on the real clusters. And then based on that, we will create one of the big stories for R3 is to make Nepio work on real clusters. So we will learn from the perspectives Sagar is going to present in this in that session. Sagar, I'll let you speak on that.
Yeah, true. That's going to be a different session in DNTF about the same thing with me and Alex's, which we do in deploying it. And there, because we only have 20 minutes in talking about the demo, because it's only a demo with the real radio unit. So I just want to emphasize, we are using a real radio unit with the user equipment and showing over the air traffic, where everything deployed using Nepio, except the RU, of course. And then in DNTF, we're going to talk about the challenges which we faced in doing all this. So yeah.
Okay. So can I put you down for that then, Sagar?
Sure.
Okay. So remember, this is May 2nd and 3rd, right? So make sure that you're still there, right? So.
Yeah, May 2nd, just to be precise. It's not on 3rd.
Okay. Yeah, you just scared me with May 3rd.
Yeah.
Well, the summit is May 2nd. The development testing forum is May 2nd and 3rd. I have not seen an official Nepio Summit day, so I was like,
so ours is on May 2nd, Tim. Nepio is on May 2nd.
Yeah. I would hope, but I haven't seen anything official from it, right? So, I don't know officially. There's nothing that's listed there, guys. I'm not saying it's not. I would assume that that's what it will be, right? But you know what assumptions do. Okay, so Sagar, what I would ask then, if these are the two, unless someone else has something else that they feel. Second. All right. So
I might want to say something. Sorry, I raised my hand earlier.
Go ahead. Good.
Just one thing, that since on these days from 29 till 2nd till 3rd, we have a lot of events, and one more is also OSC mini summit, which is there, right?
Yeah.
And so there are going to be different sessions of the mini summit on the 29th of April. So, and in that set, on the 29th of April, also we are talking about Nepio. There is a small 20-minute session which I think Ravi and Seishu are giving about whatever work which we are doing today in Nefio related to OSC, we're gonna talk about 20 minutes there also. It's the whole work, which we are doing right now here. So that is also there. So I think it's gonna be in that there are gonna be people from Nefio in that session, then people from Nefio community, then also from OSC community. So it'll be nice if anybody wants to join, and we can really talk with the OSC community with the challenges, which they have, and the challenges we can resolve using Nefio, and will give us for the first time, it will give us an opportunity to interact, these two communities all together. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Just to be specific, the title is SMO, realizing SMO over Nefio. I still need to sync up with Seshu on that. How much of it will be more kind of the implementation specific aspects, as you see from OSC and so on. So, well, yeah, that's a title though.
Might want to use the word using, but okay. I don't want over Nefio means. Okay.
This title, I think Seshu and Sagar had chosen initially.
Don't care. Okay. All right. So what I would ask though is that if we're going to do these sessions, if you could contact Candon and let them know that you're doing these two sessions for the Nefio Summit, and then I would suspect that he's going to ask you to submit these sessions. Okay. So you might want to, and I'll put this in the notes, right? So that you guys can see. Nefio Summit page with submission. Okay. All right. So that's all the information in 10:32. So we've got the next half hour or 28 minutes. We're going to go back and start talking about the crate cluster. So I think that's yours, Stefan. You want to take over?
I can do that. We had this breakout session earlier this week, and you have some notes there. Alexis, you took the notes. Would like to start or summarize? I have made some slides, but I wonder if you would like to start, Alexis, with what we...
Yeah, sure. So I can discuss a little bit my notes. These are raw notes, by the way, but thanks, Tim, for putting them on the screen. So we discussed a couple of things. The first one was whether or not we want the API that we define to create raw clusters or clusters with bells and whistles, to quote Wim. So we discussed that for a bit, and the conclusion is the O2 IMS should support any kind of clusters, whether it's a raw clusters with bare-bone Kubernetes kind of deployment, or whether it's a cluster with additional kind of bells and whistles, such as confixing, a specific CNI, some storage, and whatnot. So I think that's the first thing we had quite a bit of discussion there, and I think we aligned on we need to support all of the above. The second discussion that drove pretty much the whole rest of the 2 hours is how much should FOCOM be able to override parameter, and what would be these parameters? And if FOCOM is able to do so, how would this parameter be provided? So it's a little bit of a mixed order, but the second bullet point, we discussed about using the parameter ref design to convey cluster claim parameters. And so for those that are familiar, the parameter ref design is the ability to reference to an external object that will hold all of the various sub-objects that will contain all the parameters that we need. When we discussed this, there then begs the question, who are going to create these ancillary objects? Because the O2IMS is about creating a cluster, and that the API is well defined. It's not about creating other objects. So we said that eventually, as part of the parameter ref design, all these external kind of objects will be brought into the main cluster claim. And so at the bottom, if you scroll down just a little bit, Tim, this is something that we discussed quite extensively. This is not finalized at no point in time, but the intent on the left-hand side is to have something that is a cluster claim that is very a bare-bone kind of claim, that is the O2IMS interface, in which you can have a list or an array of parameters to supply. And what we said is, in the context of ORAN, we would have a mandatory object, which would be, and don't quote us on the names, this is not defined, but it would be something like O2IMS cluster parameters. And on the right-hand side, that object would be comprised of maybe some workload cluster configs, and it could be in there where you see the cluster template ref, the site ref, and maybe other properties. But that O2IMS cluster parameters file could also have additional objects. It doesn't need to be just one. So that's exactly the pattern we have today with NF deployments. And the expectation is, right now you're seeing this as two individual files, but the expectation is that FOCOM inject the right-hand side file into the left-hand side file. So FOCOM, through the O2IMS API, only provides the cluster claim with all the parameter ref hydrated, if I can say it that way, into the cluster claim CR. So, but this is what we discussed. I don't think we came to any conclusion yet. Yeah, I'll stop here. I think this is where we are, right, Stefan, please, and the rest of the team that were in the call. This is where we left the discussion. We haven't yet converged on the approach, but that's where we are.
Yeah. So, and I made 2 slides, just putting this in a context, and I have not synced this with, Alexis, with you, Alexis, or the Vim or so, but I can show them now, and then this is probably where we will need to continue the discussion then, because I just wanted to put this in a context also for my own understanding, and we can proceed. Can you see my
yes.
my slide now?
Yep.
So as I see it, we have this cluster claim CR that you described, and if I zoom in here, I would see that as a part of the cluster package deployment, that this CR, I mean, you need to have an instance in the cluster package in management repo. You have this O2IMS cluster parameter CR manifests that contains the config refs that will be O2IMS specific. And these things, as you showed also, then these are nephew APIs. So cluster claim is a nephew resource. When we say this O2IMS cluster parameters, even if that kind is related to O2IMS, I mean, the way we will package it in the IMS management cluster is under a kind that is defined as a workload nephew org API, in my understanding. But
yeah, don't quote us on don't quote us on the API version. It might be a requirement instead of workload. It might be rec.nephew.
Yeah. But my point is that on the FOCOM side, what I would like to see here, because or from Ericsson point of view, we mainly look right now then into, okay, how will we implement the FOCOM side using a nephew, or how would anyone else, if you don't want to use a nephew still, what is like the FOCOM side things? And what you would see here is something ORAN standardized, right? So actually now I put it just to make it very specific what is like a target, not necessarily like a pre-standard, but the target would be that if we also make, like we say in ORAN now here, we would like to make the OTIMS provisioning API also KRM CRD based. Then you would need to create something or support something on the IMS side, independent on if this is nephew or not. You will need to support a CR that is coming from the ORAN org side. And just to keep them a bit separate, avoiding any mix up here. I didn't want to call this one a cluster claim anymore. Then this would be an ORAN cluster creation request CR, or whatever we want to agree in ORAN we call it. But if this is CR based, this one should be owned by ORAN and defined by them. And then in an IMS nephew implementation, we would then still need an IMS operator that is like taking the input the way it is standardized then over OTIMS, and then map it into the configuration, and that is defined by the cluster claim and the underlying like parameter refs here then. And perhaps this could be a very straightforward mapping if we can say that, yeah, we have this OTIMS cluster parameters structure then, that basically contains exactly what will come over the wire then in the ORAN OTIMS request. But I think that is where we stopped. I think that is what we need to look into. Okay, how will this mapping be done? Because I don't think that FOCOM shall see any nephew related CRs over the OTIMS interface. It must be ORAN CRs, right?
Agreed. And so we discussed this a little bit, so we're trying, the discussion was at some point that we want to create a way that is abstracted in Nephew to create clusters, but we also want to have the ORAN APIs. So in this case, we discussed it, right? We create an abstraction of an abstraction to some extent, but at least, but that allows to support the ORAN interface. So it would become more of a shim layer, right? That cluster creation request that you have here defined in the IMS, we will have just a shim layer to translate that to the cluster claim, right? That would be the goal. And so I think that's okay. The only thing that I will be very opinionated about is we're trying to be declarative, right? So if we're declarative, it means that there is one file that is owning the state. For me, that means that a cluster request from FOCOM to IMS needs to, at every point in time, be the vehicle to any update or deletion. So where I'm going with that is the CR can't be called, in my opinion, a cluster creation request. This is very RESTful kind of imperative pattern. It should be cluster request kind of name, because FOCOM will use that vehicle to either create a cluster, upgrade a cluster, delete a cluster, scale out a cluster, but it would be that declarative vehicle target state. So that's just a little bit of an opinion on the name that you're suggesting here. But the pattern that you're suggesting, I think, look, we said it on the call Monday, it's a little bit, we need to do that, but it's a bit shameful because we create an abstraction of an abstraction. But I think it's the only way to create that ORAN specific CR or Kubernetes resource model that we want to standardize in ORAN. So I think that's a needed potential design, and the way we would outweigh that abstraction of an abstraction is through maybe that shim layer. So it's only, so in Nephew we would have a translation from cluster request or cluster whatever, exactly from that CR, we would have something to translate to the cluster claim or the Nephew CRs, and that could be a KPD function. I'm thinking a bit realization here. I'll pause. There is a alloc.
Okay, some comments? Any other comments?
Yeah, a little bit clarification when you say, Alexis, the shim layer, what do we mean by that? Because how Stefan is presenting, and we haven't discussed, I'm seeing it for the first time as well. The creation request that will be another CR, right, in a declarative manner, and then that will be received by the IMS northbound, and that will be a standardized CR, which will be rendered by the O2 IMS operator, a Nephew-based operator inside the IMS. And that will be responsible for doing the translation or rendering and generating the cluster claim and the parameter ref, right? So I didn't follow when you say the shim layer. What do
Okay,
we mean
all
by
of
that?
this, yeah. So if you look at that design compared to last week, all of a sudden here, the IMS operator, all it does, so it's not really a shim layer because we don't maintain state, but
Right.
all it does, it translates from that northbound API to the southbound API, right?
Mm.
This is all it
Was that-
does. Last week, that operator was actually actuating the cluster creation. Right now, what we're saying is that operator only spit out a cluster claim or whatever, and then we expect Nefio to implement. So, which is, I think, the exact pattern that we want. Because
Okay.
So the standardized CR cluster creation request or whatever we call it will be translated to the cluster claim by the IMS operator, right?
exactly. And so the IMS operator roles in life is only to be that's the shim layer that I referred to. Or that translation layer, if I can call it differently.
I made one more picture where I tried to just put in what we see still in this on this O2IMS side and the cluster creation request, where we still say that like here, I would not like to see any parameter ref or I don't see that those things belong here. This should be just a clean O2IMS interface with the cluster template ref as one mandatory attribute here in on the O2IMS side. You have the site ref as another mandatory, and then the cluster template input could be optional. And here, this could be an arbitrary YAML structure that is then defined by the content of this one, what you have inside of here.
Yeah. No, it's well understood.
Yeah, the challenge will be that how do we convey, if we say this is the way we implement things in Nephew with these config refs, and I like this approach. We could have like a modular structure here on, okay, what config snippets will be required for a particular cluster template, the way we want to build them up on the Nephew side. But still, there could be a few parameters in this workload cluster config that is then required to be provided as input. There could be some other parameters here in some multis config that is like always hard-coded and not required as input, and some others that are instance specific. We will still need to find out a way how to tell FOCOM or over O2IMS what shall be contained here in this input structure.
Yeah, and that's I agree, and yeah, I think this is and I'm thinking realization again. The O2IMS operator will translate. So as Red Hat, as an IMS provider, I will know, whatever, once the cluster template input will be standardized, I will know how to manage them with my flavor, as the other cloud provider will do for their own flavor, because they will provide the O2IMS.
Yeah.
And then the only requirement now becomes the O2IMS operator will have to update, if you recall, the status, right? We talked about this in the past.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden, we need to, well, not all of a sudden anyway, it was the same as last week. We still need to resurface the status in that main O2IMS request with, these are all the objects that has been created or that are being managed by that it's like child kind of objects.
Mm.
So that way, if you recall about FOCOM being aware or being able to know when it's ready, then FOCOM from there has the status field, can go and find out of the status field. But that's where I don't, okay, you have that here.
I have updated this one so that like no, hopefully it is aligned. So if we have in Nephew then internally, we have this cluster claim still where you can internally monitor the status with the internal operators or logic then of the cluster claim. Then the O2IMS operator should be able then to only monitor that one internally, and then it will update the O2IMS resources accordingly. Here I think that on O2IMS side, you should have this cluster request then as one resource where you track your ongoing request. And then I think in one of the previous meetings, we discussed that once you have completed the deployment, like according to ORAN, then you should actually expose the cluster as more like inventory resources then over O2IMS. So you have like a node cluster CR and the deployment manager CR that is like representing the cluster as up and running.
I want to be very, very careful here.
Mm-hmm.
At no point in time in working group 6, we're talking about defining objects for the inventory as CRDs, right?
I know. Mm.
So if you want to go fight the battle, be my guest. I won't.
Yeah.
So where I'm going with my comment is I'm not sure the node cluster and deployment manager CR should see the day in Nephew if the intention is that they are, using the ORAN kind of API version, because that's not something that is even being considered in ORAN. So we're getting a little bit ahead here. So in terms of implementation, the O2IMS will rely probably on a database, and we'll be able to expose in the future through the inventory API these objects. But I want to make sure we stick to, standard and not deviate with these objects here.
Actually, what I was saying, like actually that I have checked this with also with Thomas Fredberg, that is working a lot with the ORAN standardization, and we thought that it's for particularly for these things, it should be possible potentially to promote that these CRs, this is as a CR based exposure over O2IMS. Then the other inventory resources like the sites and compute resources and so on, they for sure they would be then staying as the current interface that is already defined. But potentially these two could be candidates to be exposed as CRs. But you are right, that is something we also need to align in ORAN.
And Stefan, but it's going to beg the question: how do you make the delineation between what could make as a CR versus what shouldn't? I mean, it's if there is not a clear line in the sand, then it's going to be a mess for any SMO to interact with any IMS.
Yeah.
So also, Stefan.
Yeah, we can follow up on this. I think. Yeah, this is.
Just real quick, it's that because just to bring that forward, right? Because again, within ORAN we did a TR, for the cloud native, and they went through and just said, hey, look, we can do provisioning of the cluster and the infrastructure, but using declarative, in other words, CRD if you want to do that, right? So that's what the TR kind of talked about. It says, but we wanted to stay away from these other functions on the O2 interface like inventory. Now, the bigger question I think that what you get on that, it gets into a little bit what Alexis was talking about, was that says what makes this node cluster and deployment manager such that you have to in the IMS, or not the IMS, but in FOCOM or in the SMO, that you would use that instead, because you still have to deploy it, you still have to expose it as inventory, right? That you would need it for as a CR that you would not already get because it's exposed as the inventory. It's not not an or, right? It's an and. I'm going to expose it as inventory, just the way that that's done, and as a CR. So why do I need it exposed as the and as a CR when I already would have exposed it as inventory, right? So I think that's the question. I don't know why you do that.
I don't see that we should do it in both ways. If we
Yeah.
do it, then this would be the only way you expose them. Then
Yeah, that would be trust me, my
yeah.
friend, that would be dead on arrival.
Yeah, because actually the node cluster is currently not in the O2IMS inventory spec. The deployment manager is there, but not the node cluster. No resources related to the actual created clusters are there. It's only the resources related to O-clouds and servers, compute servers, and so on. They are there currently. So that is why I thought that at least the node cluster and then potentially the deployment manager should be possible to be moved over then to like a CR based.
Yeah, that probably would be dead on arrival. But again, I think that's an issue that if you want to take it up, I would take it up with ORAN. We got Vish and Bala first, I guess, and Vish second.
Okay. So a question for on that slide. Can we see that slide, please?
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
no,
sorry.
So on this slide, I know this is Nephew slide, basically, right? And when I look at that open API interface called get APIs o2 ims.provisioning.oran.org, is these APIs specific to Kubernetes clusters?
No, a node cluster in ORAN, a node cluster could also be an OpenStack, for instance, OpenStack Vim or other IAS Vim. So in an ORAN terminology, if you have something modeling a node cluster, then you need to look into the internals of that one to see if it is a Kubernetes cluster or
the reason I was asking that was, I know, sorry if it is too basic question I'm asking. I see the slide is Nephew for sure. And then I see things like V1 Alpha 1, which is usually predominantly used in Kubernetes, right? So basically that is why this question was. So this is not very specific to Kubernetes. It could also be OpenStack cluster. Thanks for confirming.
And I just know that for sure, if we do something, what I say here is that we should have some sort of a Nephew pre-O2IMS implementation, so that like we are really showing how this should work. I don't think that if we do a Nephew pre-implementation, we cannot use ORAN org here. It would still be, I guess it would be Nephew org here or so. I mean, because we cannot just steal this from ORAN, but I mean the target. I just wanted to make clear that so that we can differentiate here. The target would be that eventually, when ORAN is having this specified, it should look like this. Right?
Correct. That's what I was thinking, but I was confused with the V1 Alpha 1, and I wanted to confirm my understanding because I usually think that there's an adapter sitting somewhere that can actually take the context-sensitive base information and talk to either OpenStack cluster or a Kubernetes cluster. In my mind, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, and you seem to confirm that is not specific. That Open API, that the 3 gets are not specific to Kubernetes, but it could be anything else as well. Non-Kubernetes as well.
Actually, in this illustration, I should even remove Vim1 Alpha because it doesn't. I mainly just want to highlight like we have a different set of APIs exposed that we need to support that are ORAN standardized, and then we have still internally we have the Nephew CRs then that is like driving the internal creation.
Thanks.
Okay, Vish, you're next, and then Vish hands down. So Ravi.
Actually, it's me. Actually,
okay.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Yeah, Stephen, I think I looked at the implementation. If you look at the reference implementation for the O2IMS, I don't know there is deployment manager is essentially considered as a cluster, unless I'm mistaken. But if I look at the reference implementation from OSC for the O2 the WGSX inventory specs, if you look at that, it's kind of deployment manager is kind of make equivalent to a cluster. So just wanted to highlight that in addition to what Tim and Alexis have already highlighted, as these are represented as inventory objects in a REST API.
Yeah, let me see, so I followed you. How does it look like right now in OSI? I was aiming here to, these two will basically be one-to-one mapped here. So if a deployment manager is basically representing the Kubernetes API endpoint for this node cluster. Is that how it currently looks like in OSI?
Yes,
No.
For example, if you see look at the current APIs, current specification which are in stage 3 from the ORAN, from the inventory, everything is gets only supported. The API is such that get me the list of deployment manager, or get me a single deployment manager with all the details. And essentially what they do is, for the get the deployment managers, the OCloud will return the clusters that it is aware of. And then when it says get me a single deployment manager, it returns the cluster with all the other details such as kubeconfig, if it is Kubernetes specific, all those details.
Because this depends on the AutoDMS profile you are going to use. If you use this Kubernetes profile, I think that is the one we will aim for here only to be supporting. Then the deployment manager is basically representing the Kubernetes API.
Yes. Kubernetes API endpoint, yes. Yeah. Thank you.
So a question, if we, okay, this is perhaps we can elaborate on
guys,
further, but
hey guys, sorry, just noted, it is actually 11:01. So
yeah,
and the SIG automation meeting is on. So I'm gonna hold it here.
Yeah.
Now the question is, Alexis, Stefan, I don't know if you're going to have to. We'll keep you onto this half-hour schedule, but I don't know if you guys want to have an extra meeting or not. But I'll leave it to the two of you to figure out what you want to do next on it. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, Stefan, I'll ping you and I'll ping Wim. I think we need to sit down.
Yeah.
Okay, but thank you very much, Stefan. I think we're closer and closer.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.